Então, beleza, vamos lá, pessoal. Vamos voltar aqui, olha, para a segunda parte do documentário oficial do Python, né? E a gente terminou naquela parte que eles falam um pouco sobre como que veio, né, essas ferramentas de dados e tudo mais, veio a Anaconda. E vamos lá, a gente tem muita coisa aqui para ver e bora.
Well, I remember hearing from a friend of mine that Guido van Rossum was just working at Google. And that, when I thought about it, I'm like, wait, yeah, Guido, I guess, works at a normal company, and I can't remember the exact circumstances, but I think.
Não, ô rapaz, chama o Guido aí, ele trabalha na empresa normal. Ah, como é que é a empresa dele? Como é que chama? Ah, Google. Empresa normal pra caramba.
Either I got an introduction to him, or I think maybe just sent him an email saying, hey, big fan of your work. You know, it's like fan mail, basically. And he responded, and we got lunch. I mean, he's a hero of mine, and he was totally friendly and approachable.
And at that talk, it was revealed that Dropbox was entirely written in Python, both the client and the server. And that was exciting.
He was interested in what we were doing with Python, and I think we were stretching the language and the runtime in interesting ways.
He approached me again and said, hey, we would really like you to work for us.
And then to my surprise and delight, he ended up joining the Dropbox team, which was super exciting for all of us.
I stayed there for 7 years. We did more important stuff for Python than I did during 7 years at Google, I think.
Caramba.
I think he had a big impact on the rest of the team. You know, here's someone who's one of the icons of computing, but you would never know it just from his, how he badges into the office every day. And I think set a really great example in terms of being super humble and curious and friendly. You know, it's hard for me to think of someone who has had more impact with lower ego.
Let's start with the first Python license plate. Sorry. That was my car when I lived in Virginia. And there was a box on the application. Sorry, just grabbing the other one too. Do you want a custom license plate? So I managed to get Python in Virginia, and in California, Python was long taken. Like someone in Silicon Valley probably has a Python license plate somewhere. So the best I could get was Py3K, which I thought was pretty cute anyway. It became ever more popular. And people started thinking about flaws in the language.
There were a lot of ideas floating around the core development community, changes you could make to the language that people thought would be major improvements. The only problem with them was that they would break old Python code that currently existed.
Some of that probably got away from us a little bit in hindsight.
Opa! Aqui, ó. Deixa eu vir pra cá. Se não for apresentado a treta que rolou quando foi tentado passar pro Python 3, eu acho que eles vão mostrar, cara. Isso aqui não foi nem um pouco simples, tá? Não foi nem um pouco simples. Depois eu vou contar minha história, porque eu participei mais ou menos, eu vi mais ou menos essa transição, peguei o finalzinho dela. Mas isso aqui foi problemático, tá? Você passa do Python 2 pro Python 3.
We released Python 3.0 in December of 2007. I remember because I was actually interning under Guido at the time. We were giving people roughly 5 years, I think, to do the transition.
And everyone thought that was just extraordinarily generous. The world would totally be on Python 3 in just a few years.
This is best for the language long term. We're going to make these changes. The community's always come along with this. We think they'll come along on this journey as well.
We were very naive about that, and they made us know it.
The community said, no, not worth it. Kill it, don't do it. It's not going to work. This included some very notable individuals in the community.
Aí, ó. Que eu falei que o criador do Flask fez barulho pra caramba por causa disso.
So please welcome our next speaker.
Hi, my name is Armin. You might be familiar with some of the Python libraries that I wrote, and you might even maybe use some of them. The Python 2 to Python 3 transition. Initially, it happened very gradually over many years. There was the version that everybody used, and there was sort of the version on the side that I built that nobody used.
People didn't want to put in the effort because their code worked, you know? Why rewrite it?
It's very hard to mix Python 2 and 3. It's a headache.
So I just didn't move, and a lot of people didn't move. It felt there's a likelihood that it will not go anywhere.
It felt much more like a top-down decision than any of the things in the past. And that top-down decision, I think for some people felt like it was not inclusive of the real pains of people who had a long tail of use cases.
I think I severely underestimated how successful Python already was, how many people had written so much code in Python 2 that it would be hard for them to sort of put the effort into translate it to Python 3. I thought
the most controversial thing by far was that we wanted to change the way Unicode was handled.
A way to say these things are strings and they're human consumable, they're words that people want to read and write, and these things are bytes. These are things that computers want to read and write.
We basically made all strings Unicode, and we made you use a new prefix B for bytes. And this was incredibly disturbing.
I was implementing a WSGI library at the time, and one of the things that you do when you implement WSGI is that you have to parse HTTP data, you have to parse cookie data. And there was always a mixture of bytes and Unicode. And it was very easy to work with on Python 2, and it was incredibly annoying to work on Python 3, at least initially.
There really wasn't a way to convert your Python 2 code to Python 3. The tools didn't exist.
I started writing blog posts about it, why I think that in the way in which Python 3 works right now, I just cannot see the move.
Aqui, ó, esse blog aqui, ó, que ele mostrou, ainda existe, tá? Tipo assim, deixa eu ver se eu consigo voltar um pouquinho aqui, ó. Aqui, ó, pensamento sobre o Python 3. E olha, cara, aqui, o Python 3 tinha sido lançado em 2008. Em 2011, esse cara mandou isso daqui, olha. Em geral, ele tava falando por que não tava fazendo tanto sentido assim utilizar o Python 3 na época. Porque era muito difícil. Você, imagina, tipo assim, tem muito código em Python 2, aí do nada os caras falam, irmão, passa tudo para 3. É como se você tivesse que literalmente reescrever várias coisas. Então foi um trabalho muito complicado. Isso daqui, na verdade, lá no final desse eu não vou chamar isso aqui de manifesto, né? Eu não sei como é que eu chamo isso aqui. Mas ele estava falando que a mudança deveria ser um pouco mais flexível em relação àqueles que estavam no Python 2. É uma história muito boa quando você estuda o que aconteceu mesmo entre esse cara que criou o Flask e a passagem para o Python 3. Ele foi absurdamente contra, tá? Deu uma treta gigantesca, na verdade. Aí depois, né, com algumas versões de Python, eu não sei se é Python 3.15, mas lá na frente as coisas começaram a se dar um pouco melhores, né? Deixa eu voltar minha câmera pra cá. Cara, comigo, pra vocês terem noção, aconteceu o seguinte, eu comecei, quer ver? Eu comecei com Python 3.3 para 3.4. Isso aí, 3.4 foi lançado em 2014, se não me engano. Então, era muito comum você aprender, por exemplo, o Python 3.3 ou 3.14 e ainda ter que entender alguns comandos que eram válidos em Python 2.7. Eu tenho um livro aqui ainda que ele traz exemplos que são em Python 3 e também exemplos em Python 2.7. É como se você tivesse que aprender mais ou menos comandos espelhados, né? Tipo, duas linguagens ao mesmo tempo. Era uma loucura isso, cara. Aí depois, né, que o negócio começou a sair. Pra vocês terem uma noção, Python 2.7 só parou de ter suporte em 2020, na pandemia. Ou seja, 2020 é alguns anos atrás. Python 3 saiu em 2008, cara. Então, assim, foi uma transição extremamente complexa para a comunidade. Quem viveu isso daqui, viveu. Eu não cheguei a pegar, assim, o core disso daí tudo. Peguei o finalzinho, mas era muito isso. Você pegava livro que mostrava os dois jeitos de você fazer isso daí, em Python 3 e em Python 2.
He was a valued community member, and at the time I was actually quite surprised that he was so viciously attacking Python 3.
I was probably even more negative on it than appropriate, but Python has such a good run and I put so much energy into it. I was part of like building out web frameworks and all these libraries. I felt like, why are we ruining all of this with this move that didn't even have that many benefits?
I had not appreciated how many people already had enormous code bases or were on their way to building up enormous code bases. The payback for that was that I had to initiate the project at Dropbox.
We had a pretty long road to migrate many millions of lines of Python 2 code.
5 million lines of code in the server alone and another million for the client. That is a very large pile of code to transform, and so we had to invent ways of sort of doing it in pieces. A funny sticker I found in my pocket. There's a build tool called Bazel. It's sort of a frozen version of Python 2. So here the sticker says, after re-education, enemy of the people Python denounced their bourgeois class, renounced formalist notions like Turing completeness, and began a new life as citizen Starlark. This is especially an example of Benjamin Peterson's humor.
I had the fortune or the misfortune, depending how you see it, to be the Python 2.7 release manager for an entire decade.
We had to adjust our plans for Python 3 and for Python 2 so that there was a longer series of releases where there were both new Python 2 versions and new Python 3 versions.
What ended up happening is then the community was like maintaining 2 and 3, and that created a lot of burden. And so this is happening all during the growth of NumPy. We made it work for Python 2, and then I think Python 3.1, I think, or 3.2, we also made it work there, but saw no adoption.
Aqui, ó. Isso aqui, olha, de cima, né, mostra a quantidade de pessoas que estavam, né, ainda utilizando o Python 2. E aqui embaixo a quantidade que estava já com o Python 3. E aqui, olha, era mais ou menos 20%, né? Era uma margem muito pequena, cara. Então, muita coisa ainda se utilizava o Python 2. Principalmente a parte de IoT, né? Foi onde que eu comecei a mexer com Python. Então, na verdade, era muito de mexer com o Python 2 porque ele era mais fácil. Isso realmente existia. Depois que a gente começou a parar de utilizar o Python 2. Hoje é considerado quase que uma linguagem morta, né? Eu não sei nem se pode falar linguagem, mas hoje não se utiliza, é impraticável você utilizar o Python 2 hoje. Olha como é que foi essa diferença, né?
We knew it was going to take a long time. We knew it was going to be painful. But there is light at the end of the tunnel.
The community contributed stuff like lib2to3 and other migration tools came out.
Benjamin Peterson wrote 6 that really helped that transition.
The language itself became a little more backwards compatible.
I eventually advocated to bring back the U prefix on the strings. And that actually made it easier to write unified code bases that target both Python 2 and Python 3.
There was a point in time where we made a very strong declaration. There will never be a Python 2.8. And Python 3 is the future.
Python 3 just is a better language, and it is getting better over time. Python 2, on the other hand, is a fine language, and it will remain exactly what it is.
For a long time, there was a lot of measurement of how much Python 2 usage is there, how much Python 3 usage is there. I think it was when PyCon was in Portland, was roughly when we started to see like 50-50.
Once 3.4 came out, it actually added some features that were interesting to people, like, oh, I want that capability. So to me, Python 3.4 was really Python 3.0. And then 3.5 was an even bigger milestone. That was the one that got widespread adoption of Python 3. And by the time Python 3.5 came out, then it was clear that Python 3 would work.
And then you started to have companies come out and give talks, like Instagram's talk, which I believe was also at Portland, was a big deal.
Aí, ó. Instagram.
Yes, you heard it right. Instagram has been running fully on Python 3 for a few months. The whole process took, I would say, about 9 to 10 months. And I think Instagram is the largest production deployment for Python at the time.
She gave a very good, very thorough talk explaining why they did it.
Two main things, typing and async I/O.
How they did it.
We cleaned out all the libraries that are not making the migration from Python 2 to 3.
How you should do it.
Unit test.
What they had learned during the process.
We had actually some good performance gains as well after our migration.
It felt as vindication that at least there were large companies that took the time to do it right and to convert all their code to Python 3 and were able to do it successfully.
It was definitely well received. We got a lot of people saying we really wanted to migrate as well, but we weren't getting the kind of support that my team or my company was giving us, and now I can bring this back to my management, and that really gave people confidence in migrating to Python 3.
It became like a, look, Instagram can do it, why don't you do it? Instagram's getting benefits, new features, faster code, why don't you also want that benefit?
Então, bicho, nossa, eu tô falando muito aqui porque isso daqui foi um marco gigantesco, na verdade. Só que acontecem algumas coisas que foram bem legais. Porque assim, quando você pega outras linguagens, por exemplo, o JavaScript é mestre em fazer isso. Quando você sai de uma versão, por exemplo, assim, seja de uma framework que você está utilizando, ou seja, às vezes do próprio Node, as coisas continuam rodando, né? O JavaScript faz isso, as coisas continuam rodando. Java também já sofreu com isso aqui no passado, mas hoje eles conseguem ter uma transição muito simples, né, quando as versões do Java são lançadas. Só que o Python não tinha passado tanto por isso, porque o Python 2 ele foi adotado bastante. E essa era a primeira vez em que eles estavam fazendo esse shift, né, para uma outra versão de linguagem. Isso mudava um pouco a estrutura em que o interpretador do Python trabalhava com, né, o que eles chamam aqui de Unicode, como que ele era rodado na PVM, né, que é a Python Virtual Machine. Assim, foi uma coisa muito agressiva que aconteceu, tanto que isso demorou, cara, demorou muito para ser feito. Mas se eu for chutar hoje, né, por exemplo, vamos supor que vai lançar um Python 4, né, eu acho que a partir disso tudo que aconteceu no passado, a gente não teria essa dificuldade tamanha que aconteceu, né? Porque, olha só, o Python 3.4 que ele estava falando aqui, lançou em 2014, cara. Imagina, demorou pra caramba pra ter uma adoção desse tipo de versão. Então é muito complexo essas coisas. E o Instagram foi fera, tá, nisso daí.
Projects undergo things like this, and Python learned a lot from it, and it did actually eventually end up with Python 3 being a pretty good spot again, that it was safe to use. And safe to use sounds weird, but like where I felt like I can actually start new projects on Python 3 now, because we're back to a stable situation where you're about as productive as I felt.
Aí parou a briga, né?
Hi, Anna, nice to meet you. I really liked your talk.
Detalhe, o manifesto que ele colocou lá, pensamento sobre Python 3, ainda tá de pé, tá? Ainda tá de pé. E é uma coisa muito legal, porque dá pra você ver os argumentos que ele fala lá. Ainda você pode ver isso. Foi uma treta absurda, cara.
But it was basically time that healed it.
When Python 2.7 was declared that there wouldn't be any more security fixes, it became a security concern. That was sort of the final push.
People who donated their work to do this migration in the wider Python world and community eventually got the world running on Python 3. But as I said, like, it was a decade-long process, and I don't think anybody anticipated how much work it would be to move to Python 3.
I think Python's probably too big to ever go through a transition like that today. The community was maybe a little too big, but not too big.
I even still get angry messages sometimes from people who are like, my code needs Python 2.7, you need to provide it, and I tell them no.
I never wavered in my commitment to Python 3. It was a lesson learned for sure. For a long time, I regularly joked there would be a Python 4, but the transition would be handled much better than the transition to Python 3. I felt I owed that to the community. And now the mantra has changed to there will never be even a Python 4.
To be honest, I don't know how many people in Python even know about the whole transition, because that all ended in 2020. At least it's behind us.
Okay, so now we get in the closet. So there's the Frisbee. This is the most unique merch I've ever seen related to Python. Now here's a significant t-shirt. It says Python is for girls. I received this anonymously in the mail at Google. And to this day, I don't know exactly what the intention of the sender was. They never revealed themselves, at least not to me. And I don't know if there was an intention even. But I sort of realized at that point that there wasn't a whole lot of women in the Python community. And the community also discovered that and fixed it for the Python conference.
Eu acho que vai as PyLadies.
This idea of being a place where people from a wide range of backgrounds can learn how to program, benefit from programming, find community. There really was some snowballing adoption of these ideas across languages at the time.
Jessica McKellar looks at the speakers at PyCon and says, there's only 3% that are women. What can we do about this? She was co-organizer of the biggest Python meetup in the world in Boston. She knew what she was talking about.
It's not rocket science. It's like, ask people if they're interested in speaking. And we just, providing like a little bit of support drove a huge shift in the volume and demographics of the talks that were submitted.
And then 3 years later, like 35% of the speakers are women.
I forget what the number was, but I think it was almost even with male speakers.
PyCon. I had an old tweet about this, so I just pulled this up. It says,
Na
hello
Python
from your
Brasil
PyCon
é
diversity
50-50,
chair.
eu acho.
So the percentage of PyCon talks by women, 2011 it was 1%, 2012 it was 7%, 2013 15%, 2014 and 2015 33%, and then 2016 40%.
Problems have solutions.
That was a very inspiring story to me also.
Something that was less inspiring to me was that at the language summit, there wasn't a single woman in the room. And I don't...
Caramba. A lata dos caras, velho. Tipo assim, eu tava conversando isso esses dias com um amigo, né? E ele realmente perguntou isso, né? Ah, velho, mas você não acha que é forçação de barra ficar colocando mulher na comunidade e tudo mais, meio que forçando e tudo mais? Assim, olha, agora eu vou abrir um pouco o meu coração, tá? E vou talvez ser um pouco político nessa parte, embora eu deteste política de qualquer jeito. Assim, eu acho que a gente tem que ser um pouco educado com esse tipo de questão e também entender algumas coisas que a gente pode tratar assim com respeito. Eu acho que, na verdade, faz sentido até mesmo, né? Porque a gente tá vendo esse documentário todo aqui e ele sempre tá falando que Python foi feito a partir de contribuições de pessoas de comunidades. E que isso tudo acabou construindo a linguagem. E várias visões diferentes acabaram levando o Python ao que ele é hoje. Então, assim, é claro que a força dessa linguagem veio, sim, de perspectivas diferentes de vida, né, e de utilização de linguagem. Hoje eu entendo que se a gente trazer mais pessoas para olharem essa linguagem e entender, né, os aspectos ali, principalmente as dores que elas estão sofrendo, faz sentido para a evolução da linguagem. E é claro que uma perspectiva minha talvez se case mais com alguma pessoa que sim, tem as mesmas condições minhas dentro da sociedade. Então talvez eu enxergue alguns aspectos do mesmo jeito que uma pessoa mais branca enxergaria. Então é interessante sim, às vezes, você pegar outros tipos de pessoas para ter as perspectivas ali sobre a linguagem, principalmente, né, uma perspectiva feminina, das dores que elas sentem. Então eu trago um pouco mais esse tipo de argumentação de uma forma respeitosa e falando porque que é interessante sim você ter mulheres na comunidade Python, principalmente falando ali sobre os estudos que elas fizeram, as palestras, né, as coisas que são legais, porque olha só, beleza, que aqui tem um bando de marmanjo aqui, né, e não tem nenhum problema, né, eu sempre enxerguei a comunidade do Python como abraçando todas as pessoas, mas com certeza faz sentido você sempre estar expandindo a visão sobre a linguagem. Então, assim, eu não acho que é uma espécie de forçação de barra, tá colocando mulher dentro, né? Ou então forçando, assim, esse tipo de inclusão meio forçada. Eu não acho que é isso. Eu acho que, assim, tá trazendo mais categoria para a linguagem. E eu vejo isso de uma maneira muito legal. E é claro que, assim, a gente não tem que fazer isso de uma maneira tão... como é que eu posso dizer, né? Porque é complicado ficar debatendo isso, né? Mas eu acho que isso não deve ser colocado, por exemplo, né, na força, assim, das pessoas. Eu acho que tem, sim, alguns critérios que são muito relevantes, mas eu acho que vale muito a pena, cara, a gente ficar trazendo outras perspectivas, né? Hoje a comunidade Python Brasil, por exemplo, ela é absurdamente diversa. E isso é muito bom, porque traz estudos diferentes, principalmente sobre perspectivas ali da utilização da tecnologia. Tem algumas palestras que são muito interessantes, que são de pessoas pretas falando sobre, né, alguns algoritmos ali que verificam ideias de racismo. E isso eu acho bem legal, para falar a verdade. Bom, eu tô me delongando pra caramba aqui, mas vamos continuar com isso.
I don't believe we have a single female committer to core Python.
There wasn't ever ill intent, but unfortunately we fell into the trap of not doing enough diversity reach out to try to get more people to come in. To be honest, it was a lot of white men. So Guido wanted to change that.
I want at least 2 female core Python devs in the next year, and I will try to train them myself if that's what it takes. So come talk to me.
I believe one of the first people who took up that call was Marietta.
Isso eu nem sabia agora, dessa convocação por mulher, isso aí eu nem sabia.
Even though I've always been passionate about technology and programming, I also felt it wasn't a welcoming environment for women. My schoolmates who took computer science are mostly men. Most of the professors were men, and at work, most of my coworkers were men, and I just didn't really have examples or role models of women being successful in tech industry. One of my coworkers went to PyCon. He saw that at that conference, there is this community called PyLadies, and I felt like I want to meet them.
Você vê, né, o lado mais social da linguagem, né?
So in 2015, that's when I decided I want to go to PyCon. At this conference, I get to see a lot of women speaking and presenting. At my previous tech conference, all the speakers were men, all the keynote speakers were men, so this was really different.
Rapidinho, só para quem não tá entendendo, é porque é o seguinte... na comunidade Python já tinha mulheres, né? Mulheres eram bem-vindas a palestrar. Só que quando a gente fala, por exemplo, dos core devs, né, aqueles caras que realmente mexem ali no código de Python, não tinha mulheres que estavam, né, nessa equipe, né, nessa galera. E aí o Guido foi lá e abertamente falou, a gente quer ter mulher aqui dentro, né? Então, assim, tem uma diferença entre mulheres que eram presentes nas comunidades, que estavam ali mostrando trabalhos, aí palestrando, e existia uma diferença sobre quem eram os core devs da linguagem Python. Até ali não tinha. Eu acho que essa daí foi a primeira moça que acabou participando, né?
One of the keynote speakers at that same conference was Guido van Rossum.
Hello, everybody. Glad to see you all.
I want to meet and see the creator of Python programming language.
And I will try to train them myself if that's what it takes.
I heard this speech. However, at that time, I just didn't think that it's something I could do. I wasn't even contributing to the Python community. I didn't contribute to open source at all.
Rapaz, olha o mouse. Não, o monitor aqui da moça. Irmão. Oh, se você tá jogando CS, por exemplo, você vai ver o cara aqui, ó. Aqui você vai ver ele. Nossa. Isso aqui no Brasil custa mais ou menos uns 18 conto pra cima. Irmão, isso aqui você nem precisa de 2 telas.
Oh, I just thought, I'm sure they will find women next year. The year after, I went back to PyCon US, and Guido van Rossum gave another keynote.
We still don't have 2 female core developers.
I think at that time that something really clicked on me. Like I realized that there's something within me that says, if nobody's doing it, I will do it. I wrote to Guido van Rossum and I asked him for help. Somehow I felt really scared. I just didn't feel like I deserve mentorship from Guido van Rossum. So I was really hesitated to send this email to him. But in the end, I realized that I want to try. Like I felt like this was a great opportunity for me. I pressed the send button. I got a reply. He was very friendly. He started sharing resources about, how to get started contributing to Python. He offered to do like video chats. It's been really helpful to have his moral support.
We had a pretty sort of deep mentorship relationship for a few years.
Maria learned the process from Guido and continued to contribute more and more, very much around tooling. Like she really found her niche in terms of trying to help make our development process easier.
It was scary at first. Like I just didn't feel comfortable sharing my questions in public. I didn't want people to know that I don't know how to do certain things. Like I didn't want people to see that I'm actually not that good. But this is how it works in open source. And the community has always been kind and helped me with my questions without saying that you're stupid. Like I never felt like I was being judged.
I think it does start with Guido.
The fact that Guido was very active in bringing more voices into Python absolutely made Python better and stronger.
Just the way the whole community works and what we stand for, thanks to Guido's leadership, is where I want to be. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
Ah, cara, mas tipo assim, é uma dúvida normal. Se falam assim pra mim, vira aí core dev do Python e começa a codar as coisas. Cara, eu não sei nem por onde começar. Não sei nem o que fazer. Então assim, se não tiver ajuda, se a comunidade não for solícita a te ajudar, nossa, eu nem sei.
6, 7 months after I started reaching out to Guido, I was recommended to become a Python core developer.
Aê!
It really wasn't until 4 months ago that for the first time ever, there's a woman.
Aê, filho!
There's a woman who became a Python core developer and earned that commit privilege.
The first woman ever to join our team and has continued to be there and participate and try to help us, and always a very good advocate to try to improve our diversity.
Quanto de mulheres será que são core devs hoje? Eu não sei.
My life really changed after that. A lot of opportunities opened up just because I'm a Python core developer.
Marietta went on to give her own set of talks about how important mentorship is.
When you don't have role models who you can relate to, you start believing that you cannot do it. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Marietta. I'm a PyLady. I run PyLadies Vancouver. I also help with the PyLadies Con. 10 years ago, I was also in this room in the PyLadies luncheon at PyCon US 2015. It was a life-changing event for me. It was at that event that I felt for the first time in my life as a developer, I felt like I belong in tech. Because I see 100 women in the room with me. I just want other women to have role models. I hope I can help inspire them and help them. These opportunities belong to you too. You're all the reason I do this, because I know there is still a lot to do, and I know together we can help each other and support each other. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody.
I have been so consistently impressed by the Python community's ability to have respectful and real reflection and dialogue about how to steward itself and how to move it forward in a way that I find so inspiring and a vision of what is possible in other communities. And I mean that really sincerely.
Eu não sei se outras linguagens foram, né, tão solícitas às mulheres assim. Isso é uma coisa muito interessante trazer essa parte.
There were an ever-growing number of sort of scientific disciplines where all the code was written in Python, or a lot of it was prototyped in Python at least. And then the next step was machine learning packages, which started with TensorFlow and was later followed by PyTorch.
For a long time, Python was seen sort of as a scripting language that you would just do small things that you need to automate and not production-ready code. And so it wasn't given a ton of attention. And then now AI/ML has sort of changed things where it is now a business driver.
It appeals to people who are not professional programmers, but need software to do a task.
There are some other languages, like R, you can do some interesting stuff in, but Python is really it for AI/ML these days.
Python has probably like centuries of engineering time that has gone into code in the ecosystem specifically on those topics. So if you're using Python, you're able to instantly tap into those libraries.
Meta has PyTorch, which has an amazing Python API and front end people can interact with. There's also SciPy, NumPy, Numba, Pandas. There's a whole suite of really extensive tools.
Trying to build a language and a language ecosystem that is amenable to all of that is non-trivial. That actually took real design, real thought, and real ecosystem collective innovation over the course of decades.
The back end of those tools are usually C or Fortran or some other native language that's much faster, but would be difficult for someone with an AI background to program in.
And it continues to be used for all that by all the AI scientists developing models, and people training the models, people using the models.
And that brings yet another increment of growth to the Python community.
Python's a fantastic language, even if you're not a scientist. I just don't think it would have risen to the level of dramatic usage without the science first, data science, machine learning story, we had a massive impact in the world.
You know, I think one testament to the future of Python is if you prompt any of the LLMs to do code generation today, if it's front end, it's going to be JavaScript. If it's back end data analysis, it's going to be Python.
É verdade.
That's the future. And Python is a part of that future. Lucky me that I chose that language and not a different one.
Não, isso aqui é muito verdade, cara. Eu acredito que Python ainda tem espaço para crescer mais ainda, pra vocês terem noção. Tá tendo muitas melhorias, né? No tempo que eu tô gravando isso daqui, a versão que foi acabada de lançar é a 3.14 e já tá trazendo boas melhorias. Eu acho que tem muito mais para ser feito. Eu realmente considero, né, que Python vai se tornar ainda mais popular com o passar do tempo.
Hey, Diego.
Oh, hello. Morning.
Hope you don't mind being filmed.
Yeah. Okay.
Ida's following me.
Right.
Yeah, she's shooting some B-roll for the documentary, I think.
Nice. I first used Python in 1997 or something like that.
Wow, that's really early days.
So it's got 30 frames of animation.
Oh, wow.
I told everyone that he would hate getting the DSA, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, sorry, the DSA?
The Distinguished Service Award. I labeled him in the annual report as like a leader in the Python community once, and he made me take it out.
Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he was on the steering council for 5 years.
Uh-huh.
And he was a leader.
I got a job from a Python conference back in 2017. I grew up in India, I moved to Germany, it changed my life. So I think like Python changed a lot of things for me, and I just wanted to like say thanks to you for making this language like
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I take a picture with you? Or that you don't like it?
I'm so sorry, I really don't like it, and
Okay, no
especially not in busy places.
Okay, no problem. I get it.
Okay, find me in a dark alley and I'll do it.
Okay, okay. I get it.
O que eu falo, o Guido não gosta de tirar fotos, né? Eu acho que ele até já postou publicamente que ele não gosta de fazer isso. Assim, eu acho que é porque ele não deve ter sossego quando ele vai nessas conferências assim, sabe? Ele não deve ter. Eu acho que, tipo assim, se ele estiver andando na rua, ninguém vai parar ele. Uma vez uma vez eu tava no metrô, né? E o cara, ele, assim, olha, numa parte assim do vagão, um cara gritou lá de trás: "Programador Lhama!" Aí todo mundo foi e virou assim, olha, né? Aí eu fiquei, nossa, cara, que saco, né? Podia ser um pouquinho mais discreto. Só que assim, foi uma única vez na minha vida que isso aconteceu. Só que eu acho, por exemplo, que o Guido, cara, ele não deve ter sossego aqui na... Ou o povo é meio envergonhado, né? Não sei. Mas eu acredito que ele deve ter sossego nessas conferências, não?
I always kind of looked at myself as the bass player of Python, which is great. You know, you can do a lot, you can have fun, and the spotlight's not on you. And I love that. I can't imagine having that kind of spotlight on you, you know, for so many years.
I heard a story from an Apple VP of engineering that Steve Jobs had turned down their hire of Guido because he said he has his own following and we don't want to have that kind of distraction.
Nossa, credo.
Python has always been a language that changed. We've never been one of those languages that says, if you write code against this version of Python, it will run forever with any new version of the language. We just simply have never been those people.
A PEP is an acronym for Python Enhancement Proposal. That's a document that's written by someone who wants to make a significant change to Python. Basically, you're trying to convince people that this is a good idea. It would be sent for discussion for a mailing list, and then eventually Guido, as the BDFL, the benevolent dictator for life, would decide whether your change was going in or not.
But people always have worried that the next change is going to be the one that changes the feel of the language. It won't fit my brain anymore, or it won't be accessible anymore. I've actually seen people storm out of rooms saying, you're ruining this language. Some people take it very, very personally and seriously. And the Wallace operator was no different.
Yeah, so PEP
Nossa.
572.
Isso foi uma
I don't know
treta.
who coined the term the walrus operator, but if you kind of turn your head, it looks like a little walrus. It was a new feature that was proposed, but it was also a syntax change.
The walrus operator lets you do assignments, meaning put values into variables in place.
Olha isso aqui, ó. Fala que não parece muito Go. Esse negocinho aqui, olha, esse 2 pontos igual. Nossa, uma vez eu estava passando no Reddit, né? Eu não costumava ver PEPs, ver a discussion lá do Python, essas coisas, mas eles falaram desse caso em específico. Desse caso, que eles queriam cometer isso aqui no Python. Eu era contra. Na verdade, isso, assim, isso já tinha passado, foi há um tempo atrás aí, só que depois eu fui ver o que era, né? Eu não gostei.
In places that you previously could not.
That was probably the most contentious language change, oddly enough, because it's kind of a minor thing, but there was so much passionate feeling about whether that should be added or not that it created kind of a bit of a ruckus.
When I first saw the walrus operator, I didn't like it. It kind of felt a little unPythonic to me. But then I started to play with it. There was a particular use case that I came up with in my own code that I was like, oh, you know what? This is actually pretty cool. And so then I was like, well, it's something that I won't use very often, but when I need it, it's really great to have. And I turned, 180 degrees and became a fan of it. But it was very disruptive.
Language features and especially syntax.
Eu tô muito triste. Essa feature parece violar o design do princípio do Python. Simplicidade, explicidade, leitura de pessoas casuais. Eu sou totalmente de acordo com isso aqui, com esse comentário. Faz a sintaxe do Python ser mais complexa, mas não resolve nenhum problema. Eu sou exatamente desse pensamento aqui, olha. Exatamente, né? O perfil de gatinho aqui lançou uma coisa que eu sou muito a favor.
X can be a double-edged sword, so one person's succinct, elegant code can be another person's unreadable puzzle or obfuscated mess.
There were very strongly voiced predictions about how bad it would be for Python.
And then just because Python was so much more popular at the time.
Cara, pra você ter noção, deixa eu falar um outro caso aqui, olha só. Eu já criei uma tretazinha pequena, óbvio, não foi o tamanho disso aqui, mas em relação a Python. Quando você tenta fazer essas propostas de melhoria e tenta apresentar isso para a comunidade, é aqui que ela se torna um pouquinho tóxica. Eu tenho até um e-mail de um cara que ele é core dev do Python, que ele falou o seguinte para mim, olha, não leve pro pessoal o que você vai receber, né? Não leve pro coração o que você vai receber. Mas eu queria fazer o seguinte, em Python a gente tem, né, a orientação a objetos, e eu até tenho playlists aqui no canal sobre orientação a objetos, mas a gente não tem uma coisa que é muito básica em orientação a objetos, que são as interfaces. Né? Interfaces de classes, a gente não tem isso. E eu queria tanto que tivesse, porque a gente fica meio que fazendo uma espécie de gambiarra. Usa, né, métodos abstratos com classes abstratas para fazer interfaces. Né? É uma loucura. E eu queria muito, muito que tivesse interfaces. E tinha galera que apoiava isso já de um tempo atrás, né? E tem uma galera que odeia, que não quer interfaces em Python, de jeito nenhum. E, cara, eu fiquei assim, meu Deus do céu, mas tanta gente já faz isso, só que usando classes abstratas. E aí, cara, em algumas discussões eu fui muito bem xingado, tá? Eu fui muito bem criticado por causa disso. Eu tentei fazer uma proposta, eu tentei entrar lá no discussion do Python para fazer isso, mas teve uma galera que me atacou fortemente, tá? Aí ela começa a se tornar chata. Isso rolou até esse ano, pra vocês terem noção. Foi esse ano que rolou. Assim, é porque é chato, né? Algumas pessoas tomam isso realmente pro coração. Mas eu queria muito, bicho, se tivesse interfaces em Python, eu ficaria tão feliz. Mas não deu, né? Eu lembro que O próprio Guido, ele comentou num outro caso atrás que ele não era muito a favor de interfaces em Python. Eu fiquei, véi, aí é difícil, né? É chato. Mas tudo bem, fazer o quê?
There are so many places where people talk about Python. I mean, Twitter, at the time.
This is all happening in public, right? And everyone can kind of, with low effort, throw their hat into the ring. And not everyone is going to restrain themselves when they're doing it.
I started being more and more convinced that PEP 572 was actually the right thing to do. I was the BDFL, and I accepted the PEP.
Aí a
And the
treta
next
aí, ó.
morning, I woke up, and I felt miserable because of all the attacks that had happened before. I sat down at my computer, wrote a short email, and hit send, wherein I announced that I resigned as BDFL. And that had an incredible impact. Because nobody had expected I would resign, and certainly not that I would rage quit over this issue, which essentially it was.
Não, pra vocês terem noção, o Guido já falou isso daqui. Teve gente que ameaçou ele de morte por ter aceitado essa PEP. Rapaz.
Transfer of power. And now that PEP 572 is done, I don't ever want to have to fight so hard for a PEP and find that so many people despise my decisions. I would like to remove myself entirely from the decision process. I'm basically giving myself a permanent vacation from being BDFL, and you all will be on your own. I am not going to appoint a successor. So what are you all going to do? Create a democracy? Anarchy? A dictatorship? A federation? I'll still be here, but I'm trying to let you all figure something out for yourselves. I'm tired and I need a very long break. That was it. I haven't read that. I thought that was pretty well written.
I like to say he mic dropped his way out. He just was like, I'm out. I'm done. You guys figure it out. So it was a complete and total shock to me. Yeah.
I just felt really sad about it. I wish he would have retired under better circumstances.
I felt I needed to take a step back to sort of recover myself.
I think
Cara, assim, olha, de verdade, agora eu vou dar minha opinião sobre isso daqui, né? Sobre o Gui ter saído, né, dessa governança. Assim, olha, isso é uma opinião muito pessoal minha, né? Mas eu acho que, assim, deu certo por um bom tempo, porque o Guido era o Guido. Se fosse outra pessoa, talvez não teria dado tão certo assim. Principalmente porque ele era muito aberto a ouvir as opiniões das outras pessoas, né? Então isso fazia muito sentido, né? Ele conseguia interagir de uma maneira legal. Só que, cara, assim, olha, quando a linguagem vai crescendo, principalmente em popularidade, em funcionalidades que ela vai abraçando e tudo mais, eu começo a achar, né, que centralizar muito poder em uma pessoa talvez não seja tão legal, né? E eu assim, olha, velho, é porque é difícil, né? É bem difícil. E aí, eu acho que deu certo por um bom tempo, porque o Guido era o Guido, porque ele, assim, era muito aberto às pessoas. Porque imagina, se esse cara aí, ele virasse e falasse, a linguagem é minha, não aceito isso daí, para com essas besteiras aí todas, Python não seria tão popular o quanto que foi, né? A contribuição da comunidade foi muito boa. Então é isso, cara. Pra mim, eu acho que valeu muito, durante muito tempo, mas agora realmente eu não sei se, até mesmo, né, por receber essa carga toda negativa que o cara recebeu, é difícil, cara, é difícil. Mas hoje eu não seria muito a favor de uma pessoa, né, de um ditador benevolente para a vida. Eu não seria tão a favor assim, não.
I think a lot of people really felt for Guido, that he could be pushed to that point. Like, maybe we let him down to allow the vitriol over this change to Python to push, you know, somebody that we cared about to that point.
We all perceived that it was like a momentous occasion, or like a significant change that you would put a mark in your timeline in the history book in the history of Python, right? Because it had been run on the BDFL model for its entire existence. So there was a little bit of uncertainty, like, can this work at all without guidance of Guido?
It kind of a parent saying it's time for you to grow up and figure it out on your own. I'm not going to solve this problem for you.
The first order of business was deciding on how to decide. And it turns out some people have very strong opinions on voting systems.
Programmers love arguing about voting methods.
I remember thinking, this isn't going to work. A lot of strong voices.
It's really difficult when you have hundreds of core developers and thousands of people online and millions of people in the community and probably billions of dollars of software that run on Python. You can't think about that because it definitely gets overwhelming.
I will fully admit it was stressful. I had to go to an ear, nose, and throat specialist because I actually was starting to choke on my own throat from the stress. It was not fun because if we couldn't decide on how we were going to decide, the project was done.
We really approached it like the nerdy engineers we are.
In Python classic fashion, we wrote a bunch of PEPs.
We didn't want to rush it because we knew we were going to have to live with this potentially forever, but we also realized the world was watching and did not like the idea of not knowing whether the language was going to be around in a year or not because we couldn't stop bickering among ourselves about how to run ourselves.
People sponsored different kinds of models. I think there was one which was like, let's pick another BDFL because that's what we feel comfortable with. And then there was various kinds of committees and councils, and we ended up settling on the 5-person steering committee.
Good morning, PyCon.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Look, these chairs.
So welcome to our panel with Python Steering Council.
Because there's 5 people, you don't have the same problem of like all the stress and responsibility of making these decisions falling on one person.
I actually felt that it made sense for me to be on that first steering council, given that I was no longer feeling so burned out or attacked, to provide some amount of continuity.
You know how this goes. When your kid goes off to college, some of you may have experience with that, you're no longer directly...
Quer ver? Vamos voltar um pouquinho aqui, peraí. Aqui, olha. Era esses caras aqui, ó. Deixa eu baixar a legenda aqui, ó. Era essa galera, né? Até mesmo o pessoal que tava aqui no documentário. Eu acho que foi a melhor situação ter feito isso, tá? Eu acho que foi a situação. Eu acho que fazer votação aberta, principalmente para os core devs, cara, não ia funcionar de jeito nenhum. Tinha que ter algumas pessoas ali que tinham um conhecimento um pouco maior sobre a linguagem e sobre a extensão dela. Porque, tipo assim, se entrasse um core dev amanhã, por exemplo, ele tem o mesmo voto que um core dev de 10 anos. Tá vendo? Essas situações são muito complexas. Mas eu achei que ficou bom, tá? Fazer um conselho, assim, achei que foi a melhor ideia.
With that, you're no longer directly involved in their lives, maybe, but you never stop worrying. And that's how I feel about Python at the moment. And that's why I nominated myself for the steering committee, and here I am.
There were elections for the second-year steering council, and first I nominated myself and then withdrew because there were enough other strong candidates. They didn't need me, and I was happy to sort of let go of it.
The legitimacy that came from the replacement springing up from the community is essential to it being accepted. It came from us, so it's accepted by us.
It works. I think it works for us now. There may be a time in the future where it doesn't work or pieces of it don't work. You have to be willing to evolve. Change is the one universal constant of the universe, and so things will always change, and you have to be ready and willing to adapt to change.
It started out as a hobby project, definitely. I think I probably wanted to prove something to myself more than anything. It exceeded my wildest expectations, and it actually continues to do so. I constantly hear from people whose lives were completely changed by Python. And it has created this incredible community, which was also a complete sort of bonus over everything else I had anticipated. This community that has like a massive conference every year and smaller conferences in every continent, I think, except Antarctica.
There was one of the Python conferences where there was a few thousand people in the audience. I remember just looking around and going, this is mind-blowing. That's the point at which I knew we had achieved something important, something that made a difference in people's lives and in the world.
Python turned out to be much more successful than perhaps any of us thought, except maybe Guido and his team. I think they always believed that this was the future, and of course it's now one of the most popular, if not the most popular, programming language in the world.
He spent 2 weeks in Christmas in like 1989 writing a programming language because he thought it would be fun. Like, who would have imagined that that would be such a life-altering and also world-altering thing to have done?
I think it's been great for the world. I think it's made people feel like they can get into programming when they never thought they could. I think it made programming accessible to people.
It's literally part of kindergarten through grade 12 education around the world and is on Mars thanks to being used as a scripting language to process the parachute of the Perseverance rover landing. Like, it's hard to think of anything that hasn't been touched by some Python code somewhere. It's mind-boggling.
It's an important language. It's a popular language. It's a vibrant and relevant language today as much as it was in the past, and I believe as much as it will be in the future. Programmers 30 years from now will be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm still using Python. Just like today, people are still using Fortran and C and C++. And those are old languages, you know, too, in the scheme of things. Scheme, Lisp, another old language. So, yeah.
Cara, que da hora. Não, da hora demais, meu Deus do céu. Se você for perguntar pra mim, eu acho que Python não vai sair, né, de um modo tão fácil assim dessa popularidade. Eu acho que, assim, hoje, né, quando você fala mundialmente, é uma das linguagens mais utilizadas que a gente tem, se não a mais utilizada. E eu acho que daqui a pouco vai se tornar a linguagem mais importante que nós temos. Mano, que maneiro, velho.